Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Doug Las Vegas Bets UFC Betting Show. After a slightly profitable card last week in London, we head to Seattle this week for another fight night with a crowd headlined by former middleweight champion Israel Adesanya as he takes on fast-rising Contender Series product Joe Pyfer. This is a good card, lots of live underdogs here, lots of good action fights that I don't think will hit the scorecards. As per usual, I've got a couple bets lined up for you and my predictions for the entire card. So without further ado, let's get into things. Alright, we'll start off with the main event as Israel Adesanya is back for the first time in just over a year, taking on Joe Pyfer. We'll start with the last style bender, the former two-time middleweight champion, top-tier kickboxer, long reach, fantastic counter-striking, solid KO power, and until recently, he was very durable. Although he is 1-4 in his last 5, including 3 finishes in those losses, getting knocked out by Imavov and Pereira, submitted by Duplessis, was dropped by Strickland en route to that decision loss. But still top-tier cardio. In that Imavov loss, he did get caught with a huge shot, but he looked fantastic. Imavov, you guys should know what I think of Imavov if you followed me. If you don't, I'm very high on Imavov. I've bet him in almost all his fights, including that one. If you don't know how good Imavov is, catch up. And Adesanya was looking fantastic against him through a round and a half. Really only got hit with one big uppercut before the knockout shot. And other than that, he was completely dominating. He for sure won the first round of that one. But he did get knocked out, which again, every one of those takes an extra toll on your chin. It's been a year now, although a year away might be good with how active he'd been. But now he's taking on Joe Pyfer, a much younger guy, just 29, 4 straight wins since his loss in his last main event against Jack Hermansson, where he lost the last 3 rounds, showed some cardio issues. He's a real hard-hitting, very physical guy, strong on the ground. He'll overwhelm guys, even with his submissions. The arm triangle he got on Abdul-Razak Al-Hassan was just pure physicality at that point. And then obviously the power that he's got in his hands is his trademark. He got the big knockout in his debut against Alan Amedovski, dropped the granite chin Calvin Gastelum. He has that nasty knockout against Marc-Andre Barriault. So this is a decently well-rounded, really physical, young, explosive guy. I still do worry about the cardio. He faded a bit in the Gastelum fight, which was just a 3-rounder, and now he's going back up to a 5-rounder where he lost to Hermansson last time out. Overall, how these two match up, I think if Pyfer can't force some grappling early and kind of dominate him on the ground, he's in real trouble here. As far as the technical striking goes, Adesanya is on another planet than Joe Pyfer. And Joe Pyfer is just looking for that one knockout shot. He's going to get his legs ripped apart. He's going to get kicked to the body. He's going to get pieced up at range. Adesanya's got the reach advantage. This isn't a matchup where Pyfer's going to be the bigger guy like he has been in a lot of his fights. But Izzy is a lot older, and he could get overwhelmed in the grappling. So I'm not overly confident in Izzy just because of the youth and how dangerous Pyfer is. He does have that one shot. He could land a nuke like Imavov landed. He's got 5 rounds to do it. He's pretty durable, so it's going to be tough for Adesanya to get him out of there, especially at that age. And of course, if he can force those body locks and kind of drag Adesanya down, he is going to be a lot stronger on the mat. Going to be hunting those submissions like he got against Abus Magomedov last time out. So I do think it's a close fight where there's reasons to like Pyfer. I just have a hard time seeing Pyfer get that early submission or maintain a wrestling pace over long enough to win a decision here or get a later finish. And I think on the feet, like I said, Adesanya's on another planet. He's going to be landing a much higher rate, the cleaner shots. The durability is a concern, but if Pyfer doesn't land clean, then I struggle to see him even having moments here on the feet. I think he's just going to look completely lost and get outlanded. So yeah, for me, it's Israel Adesanya is the pick, but I have a really hard time backing a guy who's 7 years older, has lost 4 of his last 5 with all the finishes. It's a spot where, like, I almost want to back Pyfer just off principle, and, like, this is the younger, way more dangerous guy with the grappling upside. If you just present it like that, then it makes Pyfer really tempting, which is what's keeping me off Adesanya here. But in the end, it kind of feels too much of a matchup like a Diego Lopes versus Alexander Volkanovski, where, yeah, Lopes is so much younger. It's so dangerous. He's been knocking out all these contenders, but both times they fought, Volkanovski just proved he was on another level with the striking. And I think Adesanya is a little further along. He's taken more damage. He's got more of those finished losses than Volk, although Volk did obviously get knocked out by Islam and Topuria going into that. But still, yeah, I think it's a relatively similar kind of matchup. I think so at these odds, I do think Adesanya's the side. Although personally, I'm going to stay away just because this isn't a spot where I want to be looking to back a guy like Adesanya. I'd be looking to back a guy like Joe Pyfer if I felt strongly about him in the matchup, but I don't. So in the end, I do think it's a good matchup. I think Adesanya is going to be the big minute winner, but Pyfer has the physicality edge. I'm repeating myself now, so I'll end off and just give my final prediction of Adesanya by decision, but no bet from me. Next, we'll go to the co-main, another former champion here, as Alexa Grasso looks to break her losing skid, taking on the future Maycee Barber, which has been the future for a long time, although she comes in on a nice win streak. Let's start with the former champion, the Mexican Grasso, with her crisp boxing, solid movement, obviously, good enough grappling to submit Valentina that one time, although she was out-wrestled badly in their third meeting. And she has a win over Maycee Barber from the first time they fought several years ago. Although after getting the title, it's kind of looking like she made that great run, and now she's I don't want to say like a middle of the pack fighter. That feels disrespectful, but I don't think she's going to reach that championship caliber again with how deep 125 is now. I don't think she's on the level of girls like Valentina, like Natalia Silva, who she lost to, like Manon Fior. I just don't see how she gets back there. I think her skill set is what her skill set is, and she's going to be really tough to finish. Her striking is always going to be solid and dangerous. We've seen her even drop Valentina with a left hook, and we know how sharp Valentina is on the feet. But overall, I do think, the book is out on what Alexa Grasso is, and if you can beat it, you can beat it. It's not, she's not going to be catching people by surprise really anymore. On the other side, Maycee Barber is just super aggressive. She's had a lot of health issues that have kept her out of the octagon. Had the seizure right before the fight when she was supposed to main event against Erin Blanchfield. But when she gets in there, she's shown like this aggressive, just relentless pace. Her grappling's good. She kept Amanda Ribas off her. She's thrown some lesser grapplers around. And she's still pretty young. She's just 27. Overall, in this one, I think Barber's done a lot more growing since the first fight, which sounds weird because Grasso became a champion since the first fight. But I just think Maycee Barber is not a kid anymore. She's not a little prospect who's taking on an already fully developed product that was Grasso. Grasso was in her prime. She was about to make that title run that we saw, so she was ready to be a champion, and Maycee Barber wasn't there yet. Now, when she's 27 and Grasso's past that championship run, probably on the decline, she's seen her peak. I think this is a spot where Barber has the edges here. She's got the better wrestling. She's probably going to be the higher output. The boxing's close, but I just think the aggression, the output, the grappling, she's younger, she's still hungry, she's still chasing that title, where Grasso is just desperate for a rebound almost to stay relevant in the division. So I don't know what Grasso's motivation is. I know exactly what Barber's motivation is. I know that Barber's going to go out there and throw hard. I know she's going to mix up the wrestling. I don't know how much pace Alexa Grasso is going to try and keep up here. I am concerned about the health issues of Maycee Barber. You just never know if she's really going into the octagon healthy with all she's been through. You never know. She could have had a really rough camp and still just be desperate to get in that octagon because it's been so hard for her. So that's a concerning thing that's always in the back of my mind with fighters that really struggle with injuries like this. But in this spot, I am still going to pick Maycee Barber by decision. I just think her output and her wrestling gives her the advantage to win these rounds in a close fight against a solid and durable fighter in Grasso. But yeah, give me Maycee Barber to get her revenge here. Next, a farewell for a veteran welterweight / lightweight back in the day. Michael the Maverick Chiesa gets his retirement fight near his home in Washington. And he gets a short notice replacement in Niko Price after Carlston Harris pulled out. We'll start with Chiesa. This guy has been a big, strong grappler for a long time. I don't know how he ever made 155 because he's a pretty big 170-pounder. He's got a good submission game. We've seen him able to finish some of these older guys on this late retirement tour where he hasn't really been tested, but he's shown he can handle the other savvy vets out there. Got the layup against Tony Ferguson, handled Court McGee in that one. So yeah, he's always been a respectable fighter. Very basic stand-up. Definitely not going to shock you there. Good cardio. He's always been able to go late in fights. Pushed Sean Brady late. He's had 5-rounders against guys like Neil Magny. And on the other side, you've got Niko Price, a very dangerous, athletic guy who's very explosive. He throws wild strikes. But at this point, you really wonder what's left. He's been finished a lot. He's lost a ton of fights in a row now. He had a couple moments against Jacoby Smith in a fight there. But in the end, you're really betting on nothing but a random knockout with Niko Price at this point. He's shown he can't win these fights against other old veterans, getting knocked out by Robbie Lawler the last time he took on someone in their retirement fight. So, like I said, Michael Chiesa has shown he can still take out these other older guys. Niko Price hasn't shown he can do that. So for this one, I'm going to pick Michael Chiesa, but these odds are a little insane for the position that he's in. Very limited. Like I said, he's just a grappler, very basic stand-up, doesn't pose much threat on the feet, and he's in his retirement fight. Obviously, he's at the very end of his career. He's decided his body can't keep doing this. So there is a big concern when you're backing a guy like that, and when you put -6, -700 next to him, you can't back that. I'm not saying I'm betting Niko Price because I value my money, so I don't want to put it on Niko Price because I think he loses. But this fight's a very obvious pass for me. Chiesa could get a sub. He could go for the ground and pound. Maybe Chiesa by KO at 8-1. He just ground and pounds him out, and Niko Price rolls over in another retirement fight like he did for Robbie Lawler. But I'm not getting involved here. That's Michael Chiesa by submission is the pick. I'll say second round, but absolutely not putting my money anywhere near this fight. And we got a banger at featherweight here as Juicy J Julian Erosa takes on Lerryan Douglas, who debuts here off the Contender Series where he got a sick knockout against Cam Teague. We'll start with Juicy J. He is an action fighter if there ever was one. This is a guy who brings it. He keeps a high pace. He's got well-rounded offense. He got nice submission game. We've seen him hit fast submissions against Christian Rodriguez, drag guys like Charles Jourdain to deep water, and we know Charles Jourdain. He's got good cardio. That's a solid fighter to do that to. And he's been doing this for a long time. He's got a lot of UFC experience. Problem has been his durability. His durability is a huge question mark at this point in his career. He's taken 7 knockout losses. The head kick from Alex Caceres. Fernando Padilla got him right after that. So you never know when you're dealing with a guy like that what's going to catch him. He's always kept fighting. He's obviously a super tough dude who's got up through this, gotten dropped a few times and kept going. But when you keep getting dropped, eventually you're going to end up in the wrong position. Eventually the referee's going to jump in. And with a guy like Lerryan Douglas, that's going to be a problem. This guy hits hard. He's a sharp striker. He's defensively responsible. I could see Erosa dragging him late, but I think the early power that he's got and the sharpness, he's going to land these hard shots on Erosa. I think he's going to get knockdowns. I think he's going to really hurt him and do serious damage. We saw him get the early knockout on the Contender Series. He's gone deeper in a couple fights. Yeah, he's been tested outside the UFC. We saw him fight Javier Reyes, who came into the UFC and got the win over Douglas Da Silva de Andrade not long ago. So he's faced solid competition before. The record's ugly at 13-5, but you got to look at the recent form. This guy in his recent fights has been a completely different fighter than he was back when, say, he got submitted by Chepe Mariscal, who was just way ahead of him at that point in his development. Now I think he's reached a good point in his development where he's ready for this UFC debut. So although I'm always very cautious about picking Contender Series debutantes against veterans like Julian Erosa. You know, we took Danny Silva against Curtis Campbell last week. I think Douglas is at a much better point in his career where, sure, I'd like to see him maybe not face someone so tough and experienced in his debut like Erosa. But if this guy's going to make a move in the division, he should be able to beat Erosa now. He should be able to use that power now and get the job done. So with that, I'm going to pick Douglas by first round knockout. But like I said, this is a Contender Series guy debuting as a big favorite. Not touching that with my money. If anything, I might even end up looking at Erosa props, Erosa late round props later in the week, just because there's already juice on the Douglas by KO at minus money. So I'm going to pass on this one from a betting perspective right now, but the pick is going to be Douglas by early KO. Not fully opposed to a play on Erosa making some chaos here and getting him late, because in a debut, this is not an easy matchup. So Erosa's definitely a live dog here. Another one at middleweight here as Mansur Abdul-Malik, the undefeated prospect, takes on Yousri Belgaroui, the experienced kickboxer coming from the same camp as Alex Pereira and Glover Teixeira, as a former kickboxing opponent of Alex Pereira, coming off his UFC debut win. So we'll start with Mansur Abdul-Malik. This guy has had a lot of hype, and I feel like it's kind of slowed down with some of his UFC performances that have looked underwhelming. There's been some, I'll call them jokes to be generous, about him betting on his own over 1.5, taking his time against Nick Klein, and then immediately just walking through Antonio Tricoli, who we saw last week, and he has that draw on his record with the legendary Cody Brundage in what was a weird fight that ended up being stopped early in the third round. Overall, he's got really strong wrestling. This guy's ground and pound is terrifying when he gets on top of guys. And he has solid defensive striking base. He saw that he can take a shot and come back against Nick Klein, because he landed that wild back fist that kind of wobbled him and almost shook up the world because of how big a favorite he was. But he did come back, obviously, get on top, pound him out. We saw him deal with some scrambles early on his Contender Series fight against Wes Schultz, Party Time, and then threw down that hellacious ground and pound to get the finish in the second round. So I think he's got a ton of potential. I think if he can put this wrestling together to start consistently getting guys down and doing damage earlier in the fights, he can become a real problem in this division. Yousri Belgaroui on the other side, he is a really huge middleweight. He's, I think, 6'6", with a very long reach, and he uses it well. He flicks out that jab, does damage with it. He'll keep peppering your face, to do a lot of damage, as he did to Azamat Bakoyev, breaking him down for that third round KO where he just couldn't take any more damage. That being said, he was on Contender Series a few times, losing the first time to Marco Tulio and not being impressive enough for Dana, I should say, as a minus 700 a second time. But they call him in on short notice, where it's important to note, I think, that he was a big underdog. He was not expected to do what he did to Azamat Bakoyev, and I think it might say a bit more about where Bakoyev is at rather than Belgaroui. I don't know if Belgaroui's way better than we thought he was. I think Bakoyev might be a lot worse than we thought he was. And with that, in this spot, I think this is a good spot to back Mansur Abdul-Malik. This guy's been a huge favorite through most of his career, and Belgaroui's coming in off a fight where he was a big underdog. So at this really small favorite price, a guy who's younger, got the more well-rounded skills, if he gets on top, he might drop bombs on Belgaroui and do some serious damage. Belgaroui might have a really hard time getting up. So I'm picking Mansur Abdul-Malik here. I think this is a good spot for him to stay undefeated and make a bit of a statement against a guy who's coming in off a big win here, prove that he is still a prospect to watch in this division. Next, we go to lightweight as the always entertaining Terrance McKinney is back to take on my fellow Canadian Kyle the Monster Nelson. So if you've seen Terrance McKinney fight, you know what you're getting, and you know this one's not going the distance. He is a very powerful, wild striker, not the most durable himself, but if he lands first, which he often does because of his speed and his aggression, he might get you out of there quick. Even in his last fight against Chris Duncan where he lost, he was piecing him up on the feet, had him wobbled a couple times, and we've seen that he can dispose of lower level competition pretty easily. Also with his wrestling, he ran right through Vyacheslav Borshev just by jumping on top of him and sticking a guillotine in because he's so strong, so physical early. When he reaches that later first round, he starts to slow down bad, and that's where we've seen all his losses come in, going all the way back to his first time on Contender Series at 145 pounds against Sean Woodson, where he was controlling with the wrestling early and then got hit with a flying knee. Then he's had similar collapses all throughout the UFC against guys like Drew Dober, Nazim Sadikov, and even in his last fight against Chris Duncan. On the other side, Kyle Nelson, he's a solid, well-rounded vet. He spent most of his UFC career down at featherweight, came up to lightweight for his last fight against Matt Frevola, where he showed his power carried. He pretty much got a first-round knockout there. The ref stepped in and right at the end of the first round, and they said the round ended when it rather clearly hadn't have. Weird situation. Either way, wound up getting the decision. He's also shown some strong wrestling. Made it an ugly clinch fight against Duho Choi, a dangerous opponent there. And he's got good pop in his hands. Like we said, he could have finished. Frevola has the finish over Bill Algeo and has shown good pop in that right hand a couple other times. So with this fight, I'm kind of always looking to pick against Terrance McKinney because I always just know it's a race against time with him. If he can't get you early, then he's going to struggle. So you're basically picking a guy to win in the first half a round almost, or you're not picking him at all. And with that, I'm going to do the same thing I usually do here because I think Kyle Nelson is good enough to stay safe. I think he's smart enough to stay safe. I don't think McKinney can blow through him on the ground. I think he might get on top early. But if he doesn't get that submission, that wrestling is going to be exhausting for him. He's going to get up, doesn't have the best striking defense. Kyle Nelson's going to catch him a few times or get on top of him himself and eventually get the finish. So my pick here is Kyle Nelson. I'm going to be playing some Kyle Nelson. Likely just his inside the distance, although I might get fancy with the KO prop because it's sitting there at plus 260 compared to his money line or inside the distance, which is around plus 140 to plus 160 range. So that KO has some good value, as I do think that's his clear best path. Although, if McKinney's gassed out, Nelson's on top and ends up grabbing a choke, I don't want to end up missing out on this one. So I might end up just playing the inside the distances. We're still getting solid plus money there at plus 160. But overall, yeah, this is a spot where I'm willing to sit down, hold my breath until Terrance McKinney either finishes or gasses out, and hope that Kyle Nelson knows how to handle this matchup. Next, a good one at lightweight as Ignacio Bahamondes steps in to take on Tofiq Musayev. These are two strikers. This one's going to be a banger. Let's start with the more experienced Bahamondes. We've seen him in the UFC for a few years, although he's still under 30 years old. 6'3" at lightweight, good switch stance striking. He's taken some guys to school with that striking, like he did to Manuel Torres in their fight at UFC Noche. He's coming off a loss to Rafael Fiziev, where it was a good competitive fight. I think Fiziev just kind of used that experience, mixed in the wrestling a little bit, It was in Fiziv's home country. But Bahamondes still has a lot of potential. He's shown a lot of good things in the UFC, a lot of development from his first few fights where he kind of struggled. On the other side, Tofiq Musayev is coming off his debut where he stepped in, having a lot of experience outside the UFC and things like PFL Tour, you know that. And he has big knockout power. Didn't really get to show it. He got taken down and submitted by Mike Tebek Oralby. But we know how good Oralby is. He came in overweight too and had to move up after that and went up and took down Chris Curtis a bunch of times. So it's hard to put a bunch of stock into that. He was a very small underdog in that fight. And that's something I'll say. This guy is legit and we got to have some respect for him. At these big odds, I'm looking at Musayev for a play here. I think this guy has the power to really shake this up. I think he's the more aggressive guy. I think he's going to force action, put some real output on him. And if he can avoid getting caught by Bahamondes, I think he can catch Bahamondes himself. He has real power that can shake up this fight. I think this is going to be a wild one that goes back and forth. I agree with Bahamondes being favored because of the physical tools he has and the UFC experience. But when you're making the odds this wide against a guy as dangerous and experienced as Musayev, I think this one's a dog or pass situation, and I'm going to pick Musayev to steal a decision here in a wild fight. Next, we'll go back to lightweight as Chase Hooper looks to get back in the win column against Lance Gibson Jr., also looking to get back in the win column here. We'll start with Hooper. He's the more experienced UFC guy, although he's been in the UFC since he was very young, so he's still the younger fighter here. Made his way up from 145 to 155. He's shown really slick grappling skills, good submissions, although his striking, his physicality has been lacking in fights like with Steve Garcia and most recently Alexander Hernandez. Steven Peterson got the decision against him. So, he's strong on the ground. He's going to be really tricky on the ground. Absolutely dominated Vyacheslav Borshev. Showed off some improvements to the striking in that fight. But still, the physicality, the durability are concerns for this guy. On the other side, Lance Gibson Jr., he's a solid, I'll call him, he's in a bit of a weird spot. He has a lot of experience outside the UFC from Bellator. That's why he was given the respect of getting a Bobby Green in his debut, and I almost called him a veteran. But it's still just his second UFC fight. So it's hard to call this guy a veteran when he has just 11 fights, just his second UFC fight. But it feels like he has a very mature game. He's got solid wrestling enough that he took down Bobby Green a lot, was able to stay calm in there and get it to a split decision with a guy who we know how tricky a matchup that is. We just saw him style on Daniel Zellhuber his next fight. So this guy's crafty. He's got a well-rounded game, some decent striking. And overall in this matchup, I lean towards Hooper. I get why he's the favorite. I think Gibson has the wrestling to defend it and force a little bit of striking. And I probably would take a shot on Gibson here if I felt he had a bit more pop in his hands. I just don't know that he has the same type of power of guys like Alexander Hernandez and Steve Garcia, these guys that have gotten Hooper out of there. I don't know if Gibson Jr. is going to do the same thing. I think Hooper is a bit better on the ground, and I think Gibson Jr. is probably going to be willing to engage on the ground because he does have solid grappling himself. So I could see this one getting ugly. I could see Lance Gibson getting up a few times, maybe winning some of the striking exchanges. But I do still definitely favor and pick Chase Hooper, so I'm going to take Hooper to win a decision in this one. Next, we'll go to the heavyweights. Veteran Marcin Tybura returns here against debuting Tyrell Fortune. We'll start with Tybura. He is the 40-year-old vet. Strong grappling game, decent basic stand-up, shines when he gets on top of you, like how he finished Tai Tuivasa, Jonata Diniz. And he keeps a good high guard. He's good at protecting himself on the feet, but he doesn't pose much of an offensive threat. And that durability may be fading as we saw him knocked out in the first round in his last fight by Ante Delia in Paris. Now, Tyrell Fortune on the other side comes in for his promotional debut. Not necessarily some prospect as he's 35 years old, but he's shown some decent pop and athleticism. He's a pretty hard-hitting guy who has experience in other big organizations like PFL. Has been caught in some stuff like heel hooks and whatnot. Overall, solid fighter. I lean Fortune here. I don't have much of a strong read on this fight, how he's going to handle this level. but I tend to think he's the much more dangerous, active, and damaging guy on the feet. And Tybura doesn't have the strongest wrestling, so him getting on top, it won't be good, but I think Fortune can defend the basic submissions, and I don't think Tybura is jumping heel hooks or anything. So I'm going to lean Fortune here just as the younger, more powerful, more athletic guy, although I'm not interested in backing him against a more experienced Tybura in a debut spot when I still have a lot of questions about his game. On to the women's flyweights here as Casey O'Neill looks to get back on track here against Gabriella Fernandes on a 3-fight winning streak. We'll start with Casey O'Neill, once a fan favorite who people really thought could make a run to the title. She was 9-0, went into that fight against Jennifer Maia. I remember backing Maia as a dog early in my days of making content. Felt really good about that one. She took Casey O'Neill to school, gave her the vet lesson. Casey O'Neill then took some time off, came back, got beat even worse by Ariane Lipski in a really bad performance. Managed to come back after that and get a win over Luana Santos, and now again a year and a half away from several knee injuries. I believe there was one and she had a complication coming back from it, which is always very concerning. So Casey O'Neill had a very high ceiling at one point, but career so far kind of derailed by injuries. Long, sharp striker, good reach for the division, good length, uses it well, sharp elbows, stuff like that. Gabriella Fernandes on the other side, like we said, comes in on a 3-fight win streak. Solid competition. She's faced Julia Storyalenko in her last one, and then Kong Wang and Carly Judice before that. A couple of really good strikers. So she's shown that well-rounded game, that ability to drop Kong Wang before grabbing the choke on her. She's done solid. She's shown her grappling can smother girls. She can defend against strikers like Judice and Wang. She can defend against dangerous submission artists like Julia Storyalenko. And she's got all the momentum here. So I'm going to pick Gabriella Fernandes to get a decision here just because she's got all this momentum. She's been more active. She's got the finishes. She's faced several different kinds of fighters. And when I look at Casey O'Neill, I find it so hard to trust a fighter that's been gone for that long after having things kind of already fall off the rails. I just don't know how consistent the training's been. I don't know if there's still problems from the injury. I don't know if there's going to be another injury and she's just going to be so frustrated that she's not going to pull out. We kind of talked about this earlier with Maycee Barber, where, fighters get desperate to get in the octagon when they have so many health issues. And it's always concerning to me to back a fighter like that because you just don't know if they got through something healthy. Fighters, of course, always go into fights with stuff. But when you've seen people hurt over and over and struggle with these injuries that have caused them to miss so much time, you wonder, can they shake the rust off? And when they do manage to shake the rust off, will they even be the same? So with that, I'm picking Gabriella Fernandes here. I think there might be slight value on her at the number, but I'm going to wait until later in the week to see if I'm going to lock in a play on this one. Next, we go to the light heavyweights as we get an undefeated prospect in Navajo Stirling taking on a dangerous opponent in Bruno Lopes. So we'll start with Navajo Stirling, the 8-0 undefeated prospect, as I said, coming from City Kickboxing, has the technical kickboxing skills you would expect of someone who comes from that camp, but he's also shown a strong wrestling game, maybe lacking a bit of the finishing ability that I first expected to see from him when he came off Contender Series, but he's developing nicely, and he's really, he's putting these UFC fights under his belt. He's getting 3-rounders under his belt against solid UFC level competition. Here he takes on Bruno Lopes, who's a hard-hitting striker. We've seen him get the win over Magomed Gadzhibulov, coming off the loss to Dustin Jacoby. His chin's a bit of a concern. His durability certainly isn't there. We saw that in the Jacoby fight, and we also saw that his first time on Contender Series when he fought Brenson Ribeiro, who took him out in the first round. We now know Brenson Ribeiro is not the highest level fighter. So I definitely have some concerns about his chin, although he has some pop in his hands of his own. Still in this one, I think the price tag's justified on Stirling. I'm almost certainly going to have him in the parlay of the week one way or another. I think this is just another fight to get under his belt here. I think this is a good chance. There's a good chance he gets that finish that I'm looking for him to get here. I'm going to optimistically pick him to get a 3rd round finish here. I think he drags Lopes into those deep waters, escapes the early firefight, and then ends up landing a big enough shot to crack that Bruno Lopes chin, hand him his third KO loss, and move to 9-0 in the promotion with his most impressive win yet. And a really fun fight here early on the card at bantamweight as Ricky Simón in his home state of Washington takes on Adrian Yanez, coming back from another layoff here. Start with Simón. He is a solid veteran with good wrestling, good power punching, basic boxing, but he really excels in that wrestling, grinding style, wearing guys down like he has in his last, in most of his wins, his last couple wins being the Cameron Smotherman win and the big knockout last time the UFC was here in Seattle when he put Javid Basharat to sleep. Although when he doesn't get the wrestling going against a good striker, he can kind of end up getting his head bounced around a little bit. He's very durable, but still guys like Song Yadong really put it on him. Vinicius Oliveira put it on him when he couldn't get the wrestling going. Not the smoothest striker, I would say. And on the other side, Adrian Yanez is a very smooth striker, although his defense is a bit of a question, and he hasn't faced too much of a wrestling threat in the UFC over a sustained 3 rounds, at least not at the level of Ricky Simón. Still, the boxing on Yanez is crisp, mixes in the kicks well, keeps a good pace over 3 rounds. He's come back from some early struggles. You know, Randy Costa was kind of putting it on him early, and he came back to get the knockout in that one. Responded well from after a couple knockout losses to Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez when he got the first round knockout win over Salvador, although he does come in off a split decision loss to Daniel Marcos and a solid layoff. Overall, it's an interesting fight here. I get why Ricky Simón's the favorite, because he's been winning more fights lately, he's been more active, he's in his hometown, and he's got the grappling advantage. That being said, I can easily see path to victory for Yanez here. If this stays standing, he is the cleaner, more powerful, more technical striker who really is going to have the moments and be doing the damage. So with that, I'm going to pick Yanez as the underdog here. I'm probably going to take some on his money line, and I'm also going to take some by decision. His decision lines are on plus 400. And I really think if this one goes all 3 rounds like it's favored to, you know, sure, Simón could have some success, some takedowns, hold him down for a little bit. But I think the damage and the big moments could really be on the side of Adrian Yanez. So I think stylistically, he's good enough to keep this one on the feet. I don't know that Simón's just going to run through him on the ground or hold him down or hold him in the clinch like he did to Smotherman. And I think when they're at space, Adrian Yanez is clearly the better boxer who's going to have the longer, more extended combos, the higher volume. So give me Adrian Yanez in this one. We will end things off by talking about the first fight on the card, a women's strawweight rematch from way back 2019. Weird saying way back for 2019. But still, this will be a rematch of Alexia Tainara's one career loss as she faces Bruna Brazil again. Start by talking about Tainara. She is a rising prospect, had a good start in the UFC with wins over Molly McCann, Loma Lookboonmee, shown strong grappling skills. She's just 28 years old. Coming into this one, having, again, only lost to Bruna Brazil. She's been undefeated since then, and her grappling, I think, has clearly improved since then. She's shown she's not going to get caught in those standing guillotines anymore. She's shown she has UFC-level grappling by submitting a girl in Molly McCann, who Bruna Brazil beat but couldn't finish. On the other side, Bruna Brazil, solid kickboxing, faced a couple good fighters, struggles with the physicality, a lot of it. She got really gun-shy against Wang Kong when Kong was landing hard on her. When she gets put into these clinch wrestling scenarios against girls like Lookboonmee, she's been out-grappled. She's just really struggled when it comes to keeping things at distance and keeping a high pace against higher-level UFC opponents, like in her last fight against Ketlin Souza even. You really could have only seen her separate against lower-level girls like Ming Shi or Molly McCann. So in this one, I'm going to pick Tainara to get her revenge here. I think Tainara has really rounded out her game, is coming into her prime. She's going to beat a lot of good girls in the UFC, and I think Bruna Brazil, we've just seen that, you know, she has such a limited game. She's not going to be able to push past this level into that top caliber. We've seen her ceiling, while Tainara's still getting better and probably already better at this point. So yeah, I'm picking Tainara comfortably. I'll pick her to get a decision win here, get the rematch, and avenge her only career loss. Alright, well thank you guys so much for tuning in. Those are my picks and a couple betting angles for the entire UFC Seattle card this weekend. Really hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and comment telling me what you liked, what you want to hear more from me, what do you want to see in these videos. Let me know, give me some feedback. I want to hear from you guys. Also, make sure to go follow my Instagram, my Twitter, my Instagram, all my social medias, Doug Las Vegas Bets. Post all my bets right when I make them there. I'll post my underdog best bet of the week, my favorite prop, and my parlay of the week when those are finalized there. So make sure to go check it out. Again, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoy the fights this weekend.